between the time that they sit down to eat and the time that they go out in the garden and he gets arrested, he gives them these last messages he wants to make sure they have. And it occurred to me that this is probably one of my farewell discourses. I only have a few sermons left before I vanish with the Methodist appointment system and go elsewhere. And Pastor Troy Carr comes to be your new pastor. What I want you to know is that I have grown to love this community and the members of this community, and I want this church to stop surviving and start thriving. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. So 13 years ago, Candace and I had a house torn down so a new house could be built. But in the old house, there was a big trellis with a huge jasmine plant on it that just smelled so wonderful in the evening that we dug it up and with great difficulty moved it from there to the house that we really own and planted it there, and it's been a joy to us ever since. And last summer I knew we were going to be moving to our son's house right behind the house we were in. So I decided to see if I could take some cuttings off that jasmine plant and root them. It looked like the kind of plant that might root. And so I cut some off, and I also cut some hydrangeas that Candace wanted cuts of. And I put them in water, and that was in, I think, August. And the hydrangea plants all put out great roots. They did really beautifully. And I moved them down and planted them in our garden. And the jasmine plant never put out roots. But the leaves looked really healthy. So I moved them down and I planted them in the garden outside our kitchen window in the house we're in now. And all winter long, they've looked healthy. And I wondered, are there any roots beneath the soil? And in the last few weeks, they've started looking less healthy. Almost, what, 3/4 of a year, and they're still green. And I'm wondering, are there any roots out there? And I keep watching, not for the color of the leaves that are there already. Those are telling us whether the plant is kind of surviving or not. I'm looking for some little bud to start pushing out and make it look like these plants are going to thrive. When you're existing, when you're surviving, you're just sort of holding on the way you've been. When you're thriving, you're growing, you're changing, you're producing something new. And I want us to thrive as a congregation, not just to survive. I want to talk to you briefly about 3 sermons this morning. The first is my call to ministry, and I think I've told you once before that on January 6th, 1966, I woke up from a dream having seen an old family friend arriving at my parents' house with a bouquet of flowers to congratulate me on my wedding. Well, I had no idea why that old family friend was there, and I had no plans of getting married. But the strangest thing about that vision is I knew with no uncertainty at all that dream meant that God wanted me to be a pastor. And I didn't even know what pastors did. I had no idea what, I assumed that if this was my call to ministry, God had misdialed, that somehow we could get this straightened out, and I avoided saying yes to that call for a long time. The reason I tell you about that is I don't understand visions. I don't understand how they work, and the one that I understand the least is the one that I had that's been most pivotal in my own life. But in the book of Acts, there are 2 visions that take place shortly before the passage that we had read to us this morning. But we need to understand those visions to understand what God's saying to Grace Church in 2018. The first vision came to a Roman soldier, a centurion. He was a person of power and authority, but he was interested in the faith. He was a person of the Spirit, and he tried to be a good person and to be kind and gracious to others. And in this vision, a person appeared to him that said, there's a guy named Peter hanging out in a town called Joppa, and I want you to send somebody down and have Peter come talk to you. That may have confused the centurion as much as my vision confused me, but being an obedient person, being a person of authority, a person who was used to giving orders and taking orders, he followed the commandment of this mysterious person that had come to him, and he sent 2 servants and a soldier to go get Simon called Peter, who was staying in Joppa at the home of Simon the tanner. For those who care about things, Cornelius was in Caesarea Maritima, Caesar's town by the sea, up north of what is now Tel Aviv, and Simon the tanner was in Joppa, which is just on the south edge of what is now Tel Aviv, and they're about 30 miles apart, kind of like from here to Lakewood. And the 2 servants and the soldiers headed down, but they didn't get down there till the next day. In the meantime, Peter is at the home of Simon the tanner, and he's up on the roof, because that's a cool place to be in a hot country. And he gets hungry. And while folks are fixing him some food to eat, he goes into a trance. And in his trance, he doesn't see a person like Cornelius has, but he hears a voice. And this voice is saying, he sees a sheet coming down, and in this sheet are all kinds of animals, clean animals and unclean animals, righteous animals, unrighteous animals. And he hears a voice saying, Peter, kill some of these and eat them. And Peter says, no way! A lot of these are unclean, and I've never eaten an unclean thing in my life. But the voice then says to him, what God has made clean, you must not call unclean. What God has made pure, you must not call impure. Then the voice says, by the way, there are 3 people coming looking for you. When they show up, go with them. I sent them. Well, the 3 people show up from Cornelius, and they get a hold of Peter, and they say, Cornelius wants you to come talk to him. And Peter takes off with these strangers to go meet another stranger, or a Gentile, a Roman soldier. And I imagine that as he was traveling, and it took him a couple of days, according to the story, to get there, and I imagine he was asking a lot of questions of himself. One question is, how will I explain to the people I love that I'm going to visit a Gentile, a Roman soldier, the enemy? Have you ever noticed that the people that didn't get along with Jesus were always the people who were self-righteous and people of authority? Powerless folks really love Jesus, but the people who thought they had it all together, that they were living their lives righteously, they were the ones that had trouble with Jesus. Well, I hope Peter was remembering that at this moment. He's saying, oh my goodness, it's my turn now. And he's wondering, how am I going to go to the good, righteous Christian people that I hang around with and tell them that I'm going to visit a Roman soldier, a Gentile? How could I explain that to the people that they thought were in God's good graces, that he's going to talk to the people that those righteous folks thought were on the outside? Plus, I would think he was worrying about the identity of the Christian community. The Christian community was very young in those days, only a few decades old. And I imagine he was wondering, how can we remain a Jewish Christian community if we let a Gentile in? We won't be who we've always been anymore. And I imagine he was wondering, is this a one-time event? Are we going to let in this one Gentile family, or is this the start of something big? Are we suddenly going to get inundated by Gentiles and discover we're the minority these days? And as a pastor who's gone to several new appointments, I imagine he was wondering, am I up to this challenge? Have I got the strength? Have I got the endurance? Have I got the perseverance to pull this off? So he gets to Cornelius' house, and Cornelius comes out to greet him. And as I mentioned earlier, Cornelius falls to his knees and bows down in front of Peter. Now, when I go to a new appointment, when I was early in my career, I used to think it was neat that people would bow down and worship me and think that I was going to be better than the previous pastor. What I found out is those are the people who are trying to manipulate me to their side of the camp, and I'd better watch out or I'm going to get myself in the middle of a major battle. But Peter didn't worry about this. He didn't think it was neat and prestigious that he was getting this treatment, and he wasn't afraid that it was dangerous he was getting this treatment. He was focusing on the gospel of Jesus Christ. And to live out the gospel of Jesus Christ, he walked over to Cornelius and said, "Here, let me help you back up. I'm just a person like you. We're peers. We can be friends. We can be friends." And then he started preaching. And instead of avoiding the difficult issue, and that is, I'm a Jew talking to a Gentile, he hit it head on. He said, "You know that it's unlawful for a Jew to visit anyone who isn't a Jew. I'm not supposed to be here. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone unclean. I shouldn't call anyone impure." Did you get that? Peter is introducing a stranger to the very essence of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the very essence as he understands it from his own experience of Jesus, from his own living as a preacher, but most especially from this recent vision he has received from God. He is explaining that the core of the good news of Jesus Christ is we're not supposed to consider anyone unacceptable. No one is unacceptable. And Peter continued by telling how God had sent Jesus, who demonstrated love and forgiveness on the cross, willing to give his entire life up to show the world God's love for them. And the amazing thing in this story is Cornelius and his family got the message. They got the message. Cornelius, who was used to bossing everybody around, realized Peter had lifted him up to Peter's level and not taken any superiority that Peter might have had and used that against him. And he heard Peter say, everybody's acceptable in the eyes of God. And we're not to consider anyone unacceptable. And Peter says Cornelius says, this is fantastic. This is a better world than the one that I've been living in, a world of oppression, of might makes right. So Cornelius and his family received the Holy Spirit and they started praising God. And Peter said to himself, how can I refuse the water of baptism? How can I keep from indoctrinating or incorporating them into the church just because they're Gentiles? They've got the Holy Spirit. They've got the Spirit of love. They've got the Spirit of reconciliation. They've got the Spirit of unity. That's what it is to be a child of God. How can I not recognize this with baptism? This is a story for Grace United Methodist Church. We live in a community where we are us and they are them. We've been here for decades, and they've just moved in. We are, some of us, elders, and some of them are kids. We've had a good year together here. We've sought and received financial support from our annual conference so that in a year ahead we can have a full-time pastor instead of a part-time retired pastor. Next year we'll have full-time pastor Reverend Troy Carr, and she will come with a new vision and a fresh vision and a better understanding of a younger generation than I will ever have. In the past year, we've sought to make our facility and programming more inviting, more appealing, more accessible. Hard to believe, but we've actually cleared out some of the stuff that was here so that there's a little more room for the song team. We can continue working on that, I think. We made some room up front here so that when we come up for communion, there's not a traffic jam right here. And if we're in a wheelchair or have a walker, we can get across the front. And if we have a funeral, we can bring a casket in without having to remove these from the front. We've made spaces in the back for Gertie and others who have wheelchairs and walkers to sit without being outside of the group. I hope we continue with those. We have selected an accessibility team headed by the Reverend Edsel Goldson, a citizen of the British Commonwealth. A group of people to continue looking at what is accessible in our building and what makes it difficult for people to be here. And Edsel, the little ramp coming into the main door of the front of the church needs to get broken up, thrown out, and a wider ramp needs to be put in there, because for the first time yesterday, I almost fell on my tush out there. And I almost did it 3 times because I was carrying stuff and not paying attention. We need to fix that. We've learned how to communicate, and that communicating with our neighbors helps us to connect. We've improved some of the signage that we put out. We sent out 2 letters to the community. We posted notices on Nextdoor and on Facebook, on the internet. And we put an article in the Leshai News. Has that made any difference? Easter egg hunt, we had a family bring a child here because we'd done those things. The Leshai community invited us to have volunteers to come yesterday to help clear the steps going from one street down to the next out here. And we had 7 members of the congregation that helped do that with members of the larger community. Has it made a difference? Yesterday we had 17 members of this congregation helping build the tiny home. And we had 13 members of the larger community working with us on that project. It has made a difference. 5 of those people were there yesterday because they were walking by and they saw a sign out here that just let them know what we were doing. A couple people were there because they'd read it in the Leshai News and they knew what we were doing. We're doing stuff that makes a difference in our world, and if we tell our neighbors we're doing it and invite them to be a part, we won't have to do so much ourselves. We put in a waste station and dozens of people have thanked us for that. We put in a peace garden installation. We had dozens of people stop and talk to us. We had 2 young men come by. Angels from God provided at just the right moment to help us lift that pole into position, because the 4 of us that were there couldn't quite figure out how we were going to get that done. Put in a little free library yesterday, and we may need to redo it. It's not quite to the standard I'd like in location and straightness. But as we were working on it with 3 young high school students from the community, a woman and her 2 children came and sat on the grass to watch what we were doing. They'd watched the building of the little home for a little while. Then they came down to watch us work on the little library. But they weren't just watching because they liked seeing construction in process. They were watching because they wanted to check out the books. Her kids love little libraries. And as soon as we got it up, and as soon as we got the books in, the kids were opening it up and discovering, oh, we already have this book at home. Oh, I like this one. Oh, that's probably too young for you. You're probably beyond that stage. She talked to us about this church, how she's lived in the communities for years, and she always wondered what went on inside the door. She always wondered what went on here. She and several of the people that talked to us during the Peace Garden installation commented they'd never seen anybody at this church. They didn't really know if it was active, except it was always kept looking so nice. We've had a good year here. We've made some changes in our vision for the future. We've made some changes in our physical plan. We've made some changes to reach out and touch the community. And those are like little buds starting to show that we're not just surviving, we're not just alive, we're starting to thrive. Somebody posted on the internet, I've seen it actually quite a few different versions of it, but a welcome statement for a church, and I'd like to share it with you. And if you want to know what it would be like to thrive as a congregation, I'd like to suggest that we make this our basic welcoming statement as a congregation. Welcome. We extend a special welcome to those who are single, married, divorced, widowed, gay, confused, filthy rich, comfortable, or dirt poor. We extend a special welcome to those who are crying newborns, skinny as a rake, or who could afford to lose a few pounds. You're welcome if you're from Upper Queen Anne, or from one of the homeless encampments, from King County in general, or just passing by. We welcome you if you can see like childish Gambia. Thank you. It's my handwriting and I can't read it and I can't remember. I lose names, but some of you know that. Or if you can't sing a note or carry a note in a bucket like our pastor. You're welcome here if you're just browsing, just woke up, or just got out of prison. We don't care if you're more Christian than Mother Teresa or haven't been to church since your best friend's wedding. We extend a special welcome to those who are over 60 but who haven't grown up yet, or to teenagers who are growing up far too fast. We welcome keep fit moms, football dads, starving artists, tree huggers, latte sippers, vegetarians, and junk food fanatics. We welcome those who are in recovery or those who are still addicted. We welcome you if you're having problems, or if you're down in the dumps, or if you don't like organized religion. We've been there too. If you blew all your money on the horses, you're welcome here. We offer a welcome to those who think the earth is flat, those who work too hard, those who don't work at all, who can't spell, or who are going here because grandma's in town and wanted to come to church. We welcome those who are inked, pierced, or both. We offer a special welcome to those who could use a prayer right now. Those who had religion shoved down their throat as a kid, or who got lost on I-5 and just wound up here by mistake. We welcome tourists and seekers and doubters and bleeding hearts. And you. I cry because that's a list of my friends. That's a list of my friends. And I dream of a day when every church is a place where every one of those friends is going to be welcome. It's going to be embraced. It's going to be helped along their journey in whatever way they are being prompted to be helped. If we follow Peter's lead, if we accept Peter's vision, if we hear Peter's sermon on the gospel of Jesus Christ, if we accept every person as being of sacred worth, then the Holy Spirit will dwell among us and will set us on fire, and shoots of new growth will surprise us on every branch in this congregation. I pray that it may be so. Amen. Amen.